angry. Like, why won't you approve this post?
And they'd be like, pretty good. Going in the pre-roll on this thing.
If you don't like the tone and the flavor and the fervor of us, you do not want to meet a 20-year-old who grew up in COVID. You don't want to talk to these young people today because they are far more aggressive than we are. They are far less compliant.
It's story time, guys. It's been 5 years since COVID, since the Dorr brothers' response to COVID. There was a time there when it seemed every media outlet in the entire country had my ugly mug and my brother's ugly mugs on the front of their pages and on all of their websites because of our response to COVID. And now it's come back up again. People are talking about it online, asking questions about what our response looked like, why we did it, did we profit from it, all of these different things.
Who we did it with.
Who we did it with, who we were working in conjunction with. And so I'm here with my brother Aaron and Chris. We are some of the Dorr brothers, and we thought that we would just tell the story of our COVID response. And we're going to tell stuff that's never been heard before. NPR did a big thing on this back in the day. Everybody thought they had the scoop. NBC, Washington Post, UK Daily Mail, Al Jazeera, Reuters, Time Magazine, all did articles and many, many more besides about what we did. And none of them really knew. None of them really knew why. And so we're telling this story today for the very first time. So what we want to do, I think, Chris, you tell me, I think that we should kind of start off with where we were kind of before COVID hit, and then go from there, right? Because everybody had a different reaction to COVID. Some people believed it, some people didn't, some people were in the middle. And I think we should just tell them what we were doing beforehand and then get into the juicy details of our COVID response. So what were you doing, Chris?
Yeah, so we do gun politics, right? So I was in early 2020, that was at the height of our response and mobilization against Mike DeWine, who is currently the Ohio governor. He was pushing for a massive red flag / AR mag bans gun control package in response to the August of 2019 shooting in downtown Dayton. So we were going all the way up against the wall to mobilize grassroots all over Ohio against that. I was at the legislature day in and day out. And I started getting calls from a good buddy of mine saying, hey, he's a foreign currency investor, trader, or whatever you want to call it. He's like, I'm watching some of these street cameras over in China, just watching the population not moving, and something's coming here, and you guys probably better be paying attention to that. So that's kind of what I first started hearing about it was from that phone call. But politically, we were neck deep in mobilizing against a major gun control push in Ohio at the time. What were you were facing something similar, weren't you, Ben?
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason we're talking about this in particular is because we turned the resources that we use in gun and pro-life politics, and we used them to mobilize people who were very upset with the COVID response. They were angry about being locked down. They were angry about being masked up. A lot of people were depressed. Businesses were going broke. And so that's what we're talking about, what we were doing beforehand, because we ended up utilizing those resources for this same end to freedom. So what I was doing was I had just gotten out of the Minnesota Senate Judiciary Committee where Republicans were in control. Minnesota Gun Rights and myself were pouring pressure on the judiciary because they were trying to pass a whole bunch of great big gun control bills, red flag gun confiscations, universal background checks, and Senator Ron Latz was going to force the vote on behalf of Bloomberg's organizations to try to get these bills passed. And we just obliterated his whole agenda. They wanted it passed. MGR members poured it on. And I remember being in that committee, and I kind of felt at the time like maybe this is the last time I'm going to be up here for a while. The headlines were starting to talk about, it's, first case in America, all this stuff. And I just wasn't sure what was coming. But we shut that down. I remember shooting a great video in front of this Judiciary Committee room where we were at, and MGR members were fired up. So the last thing we did was slam the door on those gun control bills in early 2020 before the three of us got on the phone to talk about COVID.
And
Chris.
I think one important thing to throw in there, that's kind of the lens that we viewed what was coming at us with whatever this China virus was. We weren't allowed to say China virus, right? Like the the media was all like, "How dare you say stuff like that?" But in our front row seats against gun control, anytime there's a tragedy, and I think the reaction in Minnesota was kind of triggered by the Parkland shooting in 2018. And that kind of triggered a whole bunch of gun control bills in Minnesota. Same with the Dayton thing in 2019. We see every day, day in and day out, any chance the freaking political class gets, these governors, these legislators, whatever, any chance they get to go full Rumpelstiltskin, spin the blood of the innocent dead into gold for their gun control agenda, they do it. They go all in on their gun control agenda. So looking at what was coming at us with this China virus, we're like, okay, this is going to be a monstrous power grab, and we need to buckle up and get ready to fight back against it with everything we've got. So that's a good point. We had the tools, we had the lists, had the social media skills, had the team together to be able to bring that stuff to bear in this fight, and that's exactly what we started to do.
Yep.
Yeah, the same guy
here. What's
the same family friend called me. I was in the airport in Denver, Chris, coming home from I think it was a committee hearing in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I was watching Tom Cotton on the TV on top of the gate, and he was like spelling all kinds of doom and gloom. And our friend called and said, "You better get ready for something like this." So yeah, we were working on constitutional carry in Iowa. It only took 10, 12 years, and we got it done. We were working on SEPA in Missouri and oddly enough, I was working on center ground law in Albany, New York, which of course became like the epicenter of big government COVID lockdowns and killing grandpa and grandma off in the nursing home. But you're right. I mean, it was one of those deals early on where, I remember what happened to our freedoms after 9/11. I remember what happened after lots of big events in the history of our country before, even I was born. But we could all tell that, man, if they have the ability to lock us down, to take away freedom in some capacity, what better, way to do it than a mystery virus that nobody can figure out, where it came from. So it was certainly not lost on us on day one that this might be the kickoff to the biggest power grab against our gun rights and rights in general in a very long time. That was my context at the time.
And not to mention, anybody who'd been paying any close attention for the previous 3 or 4 years had seen all of these scenarios being played out at all these major conferences across the world where they were preparing for a mystery medical virus and the reaction to it. So anybody could see that what they had been telling us they were going to do was about ready to be unloaded on the world.
Yeah. So I mean, that was, I just want to stress that point right there. It was January of 2020. The three of us, we all got locked out basically. Not quite by that point, but we knew it was coming to America, whatever it was, a virus, tyranny, control, weren't sure. But I remember very vividly the phone call the three of us had, and we're like, do we buy masks? People were talking about it. Fauci at that time was saying they don't work. They don't do anything. You don't need them. And that, of course, made us want to buy them. Yeah.
Right.
And so we were, and that was, I remember so vividly, that was a phrase I've repeated over and over and over, is we don't know if this is going to be as dangerous as they say, because we did not know We had no confidence one way or the other, but we knew, and that was a quote, but we know it's going to be the biggest power grab in the history of mankind. And that was our operating assumption from day one, when everybody was saying, go home, stay home, lock up, shut up, from the Republican governors, Democrat governors, politicians, all the media, long before people like Tucker were questioning the narrative. The narrative was, go home, this is dangerous, we're all going to die. And we knew that no matter what happened with that, it was going to be a massive, massive power grab, money grab. And so that was our operating assumption. And I think that was proven to be 100% true.
But we didn't have to worry about it, right? Because there was only going to be for 2 weeks to slow the spread. Right. So we could all just sit there and be like, oh, right, this is going to be a 2-week vacation, right? No, nah. We've watched goalposts being moved by the other side, by these cultural Marxists our entire lives. So like you said, it was Republicans just as much as it was the Democrats. In Ohio, we had Mike DeWine, and he trotted out his little globalist Democrat friend, Lion Amy Acton. She sat there and pretended that she was just this mom next door in a white lab coat that was just there to protect everybody, even though she was an Obama supporter, worked on his campaign. These were the medical professionals that were standing there next to these Republicans in many instances, telling us that, oh, it's just going to be a couple of weeks, nothing to worry about. It didn't turn out to be 2 weeks.
No, not at all.
And it wasn't just Republicans or Democrats, but what's funny to me is how fast some of the Republican governors issued their lockdown orders. I went back and I had to Google this, but I think you said DeWine did his, Chris, as Republican, granted on March 23.
Yep.
But Tom Wolf, he's no Republican, March 23. But Kim Reynolds from our native state of Iowa, she put hers out March 17 of 2020. So like it was not just the Andrew Cuomos and the Governor Wolfs of the world who are publishing these lockdown orders. I went back and I had to reread Kim Reynolds' lockdown order. And, I know hindsight's always 2020, and it's easy to say. People say, well, you can't it's criticize her. I know, right? She didn't know what's happened at the time. There are certain things that I don't care what happens in my life. It doesn't matter. Certain things are absolute principles you never, ever give in on, no matter what happens. And when I read the list of businesses, scores and scores of places, and then the churches that even Republican governors like Kim Reynolds ordered to be closed when I believe most of the country's abortion clinics were open, and most of the country had all kinds of liberal entities that were open. It really gave a great picture in a snapshot of people's first principles and of what people were unfortunately willing to accept. And that was perhaps one of the biggest negative sides of COVID. We'll get more than that, I'm sure, later on in the podcast here. But it wasn't just the Andrew Cuomos, and who was that massive, like 400-pound she-male in Pennsylvania who was Levine?
He called himself Rachel Levine.
Yeah.
We like to call him Dick Levine because his name was Richard, and we all know, shortened name of that. It's so appropriate.
Was his name actually Richard?
Yeah,
real
Richard
name.
Dick Levine. Yeah.
His name literally was Dick Levine, and he tried to be a girl.
Yes, Dick Levine, Admiral,
Gross.
Right? That finally just got settled the other day when Trump gave the final order removing him as a tranny admiral. But it was just so sickening because, you had all these churches that were sitting there going right along with this giant lockdown order when everything about this person physically was just disgusting. And here these churches were lining up as if the church had never faced a moment in history when there was plague or anything going through. There they were, locking the people of God out of the church, out of his house, right along with it. But yeah, Dick Levine.
Yeah. So we got on the phone, and I remember I got out of a group fitness class, and we all were like, bye, see you in 2 weeks. And I went, no, we won't see you for a long time. But so we got on the phone. At this point now, we're locked down. State capitals are shut down. Minnesota State Capitol shut down. I'm pretty sure all of our capitals are shut down. And we got on the phone and we're like, what are we going to do? So the question was, well, what can we do? Right. And this was like an ongoing question for a couple of weeks. And we're going to give credit where credit is due. It was the Michiganders Against Excessive Quarantine Facebook page, which got up to, I think it was something like 380,000 people in this Facebook group that were opposed to the lockdowns. And they had a 20,000 car Operation Gridlock, I think they called it. Yeah. And everybody showed up in Lansing, and they basically locked the entire, if you've ever been to the Lansing State Capitol, I've been there many, many times. And they locked down the entire downtown area. Cars weren't moving, and they sat there with their hands on the horns and just honked for hours. And so that was, I think, from our view, the very first time this kind of opposition rally had taken place. I think this was, when did that happen? Probably early April, maybe even late March. I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
I wanted to say it was 1 week before we decided to
1 week.
Go.
Yeah, that sounds right. Very close. Facebook then took down their group entirely, but we had been navigating the algorithm for a very long time. Yeah. And so we got on the phone. I remember I called Chris, and Chris and I were talking about it, and we said, why don't we start some Facebook groups ourselves in the states where we live, in the states where we work? Clearly, the American people are not buying this bullshit. Clearly, they don't want to stay home and lock up and be force-fed propaganda by politicians and bought and paid for media. And we could help give a voice to these people, knowing what we know about how to use social media. And we can start opposing these lockdowns. And so that's go ahead, Chris.
And one of the things that we talked about at the time and that we wanted to push back on very hard was the entire media, the entire American media for sure at the time, with Michigan and that group doing what they did, that the entire media was going all in to vilify them for daring to speak back and speak out and show physical resistance. There was story after story after story about how this was a super spreader event. Of course, Antifa wasn't in the mix yet, so they weren't already justifying Antifa rallies. But they were doing everything they could to go all in to vilify those people. And we're like, you know what? We have to go all in and not only just let them take the heat, but we have to expand what they're doing so that people in all parts of the country can see that it's okay to be just super pissed off about this and fight back against it. So we didn't want to leave Michigan out there to just simply take the heat and then let the media successfully vilify them. We just want to go all in and say, hey, let's force multiply that.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we did. Now, so we launched, and that's why the groups initially began with the name, because if you were following us at that time or reading the news stories, they all began as Minnesotans Against Excessive Quarantine, Ohioans Against Excessive Quarantine, Pennsylvanians, New Yorkers Against Excessive Quarantine, Iowans Against Excessive Quarantine. All these groups that we got started on Facebook all had that similar name. And we got it straight from Michiganders Against Excessive Quarantine. So we fired up these groups, and I'm going to tell you exactly what we did, because the media, they all said, the Doors are running spam bots into these groups, and the rapid pace with which they grew. I'm talking 5,000 people a day, 10,000 people a day, more. Yeah. And they said, these are fake. These are not real human beings. These are the Dorr brothers manipulating Facebook and using bots to pad the numbers, which I guess is probably something the media does, because I didn't even know that that's a possibility. If it is, I don't even know if it is. They probably knew it was a lie when they posted it, but they did it anyway. And so I'm going to tell you exactly how it was that I know Aaron did this, Chris did this. We created these groups, and I just added couple hundred people that I knew into the group. I'll just use Minnesota, for example. And so inside the group, we just did a post. And at that time, and maybe it's still this way, you were allowed to automatically tag the last 300 people who joined your Facebook group. It just auto tagged them, super easy. And I tagged the people that I put in there, and I did a post, and I simply said, before you do anything else in this group, please do this cause a favor and add 5 or 10 people that you know who are opposed to what's happening here to this group so that they can make their voices heard as well. And so, boom, it went from 200 people to 800 people instantly. So I did another post 5 minutes later, tagged 300 people, said, please add 10 of your friends to this group and help us grow this mission. 5,000 people, 10,000 people. The Wisconsin group got nearly 120,000 people in the group in 2 weeks or less. Every single one of these people was real. Every single one of these people was opposed to what was happening, what Tony Evers was doing in Wisconsin, what Tim Walz, Tampon Tim, as he's so affectionately called nationwide now, not just Minnesota-wide. And that's how these groups got to grow as big as they did, as quickly as they did.
It was 100% organic. And what I loved, like little backstory stuff, we had our sister crank out these graphics for every single one of these pages. And then, like you talked about, when you tagged 300 people, you could do that. That was the first thing that we did. We were doing that constantly. And then we enlisted teams of admins to come in and help us because there was so many people. We got over 25,000 people in one day on the Pennsylvania page, for example. We had teams of people moderating this that were tasked with going ahead and keeping doing that. The other thing is we had our sister make us some graphics that were the pinned post. So if we couldn't keep up with the 300 people at a time, the pinned post was encouraging people to do that exact same thing and invite their friends in. So 100% organic. There was no bot farms involved. Like I said, like you said, Ben, I didn't even know that existed. This was the people who saw right through the total bullshit that they were being fed by these tyrants that they had seen day in and day out for years. And they knew what was going on. Like you said, Ben, it was their businesses that were being crushed. It was their family members that were being funneled into nursing homes and being slaughtered. These people knew exactly what was going on. And that's why these pages, with just a little bit of teamwork that we developed and did grassroots, they just exploded, which was our goal the entire time.
Right. Well, I think another part of this whole, the back end, like pulling back the curtain, is, like you said, Ben, we've been using Facebook in politics for years and years and years before we got to this point. Use it professionally. And a lot of gun pages across the country, long before COVID, were getting yanked by Facebook, left, right, and center. And so we had to learn early, like, there are things that we believe, there are things that we would like to say that we simply cannot say and cannot do on this platform. But there are ways that you can creatively get your point across in a way that never crosses this ever-moving line that is not objective. It is very subjective. Usually it's a moderator with, pink-haired commie, whatever, psycho in California that will decide if we're across that line or not. So we've been doing this for years in the gun space, but now we applied that to this. And so there were hundreds, thousands of Facebook pages removed in those early months, early months of May, June, July, whatever it was, even March, because they went beyond the moving line. Granted, what they said was probably not wrong at all, but they went beyond the moving line, and we were very careful in how things were phrased. So even the names of the groups, this is your thing, I think, Ben. It wasn't Minnesotans against quarantines. It was Minnesotans against excessive quarantines. And that's an example. We're not going to give all of our playbook here. Maybe we will, I don't know. But that's an example where, hey, you add that one word and that gives you some breathing room. And so I was trying to find here right now on Google's, or as I was listening to you talk, I can't find it, but there were big articles in the media at that time because every commie, pinko, reporter, blogger, Politico in the freaking country was reporting our pages to Facebook. And this was not just like some local fact checker. This was like their head office in California made an official statement. We have reviewed these pages. We have looked at their pages, not just the quarantine pages, our gun pages as well for our day jobs. And there was nothing in them that would allow them or required them to shut our pages down. And, that was not an accident. That was the result
of boys.
Extremely careful focus on message discipline and what we could and couldn't say. And frankly, that didn't come at no cost, because good people in all these states that wanted to get more information out, that wanted to say more aggressive things, that wanted to really push back against the tyranny, were frankly getting mad. I know at me, and probably you guys as well.
Oh, definitely
angry. Like, why won't you approve this post? We're like, bro, if we do that, it's done. It's over. And so that
we had to huddle our admin teams, which on some of the pages got like 15 people, and say, hey, this is explicitly what we are not going to allow. I know everybody here agrees with that, but we cannot let that stuff get out there, because if it does, these pages are gone. And I like what you said there, Aaron. There was the left could see, these people could all see what we were doing. And honestly, I think it was driving them insane that they couldn't use the power of the media and the stories that they were cranking out to get our pages removed. They had been so successful at doing that all across the country on all these other different pages. So they were literally begging Facebook to shut us down, because they could see that we were platforming and vocalizing the opposition very deliberately. And I absolutely loved it.
Well, some of the media clips, we got to show some of the media clips, Chris, and maybe you or Ben can do some of this. I think one of the biggest ones, and maybe you want to do this one first, guys, but one of the biggest ones was when Glenn Beck, called Ben, and he's just like, hey, what is the freaking deal in Minnesota, and what are the Dorr brothers doing to push back against these crazy quarantines? You want to take that now, Ben, or you want to do it sometime later on here?
Well, we'll do it in a second. I want to keep going with the sequence of events here for just a moment, because and I love the Glenn Beck interview, so I'm actually itching to play that. But no, what happened then was we started pushing all of these rallies, right? So now you have 5,000 people showed up in front of Tim Walz's mansion. We're all holding signs. I don't know if we have any video clips of that or not. A lot of that stuff got taken off of Facebook after the fact. But thousands and thousands of people showed up. We're not putting up with this crap. They started showing up at the Minnesota State Capitol, huge drive-in rallies. They were amazing rallies that happened there. And of course, like the Minneapolis Star Tribune came out there, this nasty old witch, and she's trying to interview me, and she's trying to accuse us of crap. I was like, get out of here, you seriously nastiest old biddy you ever met in your whole life. That's what you get with a 65-year-old female progressive, right? Just like a hardened leftist, like feminist baby killer, pro-abort, gun grabber types. They were flooding in. They weren't masking up. They're sticking cameras in our faces going, why aren't you masking up? And it was just wild. It was wild times. But then it was clear that the media knew that they could not let this simply continue, right? So they decided to do a full court press on us. And the first major hit piece that came was on April 19, when the Washington Post did a big dossier. Do we have
I got it.
I think dossier now is code for a bunch of bullshit.
Yes.
But here's Washington Post. The trio of far-right pro-gun provocateurs is behind some of the largest Facebook groups calling for anti-quarantine protests around the country, offering the latest illustration that some seemingly organic demonstrations are being engineered by a network of conservative activists. Trust me, honey, it's completely organic. although we were helping. The Facebook groups target Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. Of course, that was at that time. It grew much larger after that. And they appear to be the work of Ben Dorr, the political director of a group called Minnesota Gun Rights, and his siblings Christopher and Aaron. By Sunday, the groups had roughly 200,000 members combined, and they continued to expand quickly days after President Trump endorsed such protests by suggesting citizens should liberate their states. Maybe we can talk about that last part here in a minute. But what that WAPO piece did was open a massive can of worms. And for a little while there, I mean, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that we were in every media outlet, every leftist media outlet, both at the federal level, so like NBC, I got WAPO, obviously, Al Jazeera, UK Daily Mail, the Time Magazine, Reuters. We can throw up a bunch of these as we go. It was a nonstop deluge, and the whole point was crush the Dorr brothers, crush this movement, shame, ridicule, and threaten everybody who's opposing the lockdowns. And there was some major fallout from that. I can let Aaron walk through some of that if you want to. But that was what started the media avalanche of right wing and left wing, and then my subsequent interview with Glenn Beck. But it was WAPO that started the firestorm.
Yeah, you're right about that, Ben. I forgot about the. It was on a Sunday night, I believe. I remember getting a call from my dad-in-law, and he's like, you and your brothers were all like front page news in the Washington Post. Did you know that?" And I was like, "No, I was out in the yard with the kids." And you don't go to the front page of the Washington Post with no consequence. And so, the immediate. I think we have some of the death threat screens here for later on, and all of the because the insanity of that time was not just against Trump. It was against anybody who would rise up and say, "This is bullshit. We will not comply with this." And so because we became kind of figureheads in that, man, the hate came our way in a big hurry. But professionally, what happened then, I think it was the very next day. After Washington Post, if not, it was 2 days after the Washington Post article happened, the credit card processor that we used for all of the gun organizations that we ran at that time, they literally overnight turned off everything. And we were unable to do any of our day job, unable to process any support from any of our members and all of our gun rights organizations across the country. And that was a extremely bad thing, because obviously we're at that point, we're dead in the water in terms of trying to bring in support for what we're doing with our day jobs. And so as we're doing all of these rallies across these states, at the same time, I'm sitting here in the office working the phones, calling everybody could think of to get us re-platform. It's not an easy thing to do that. It doesn't happen very quickly under normal circumstances. You toss in COVID. Most places are working remote, all this kind of crap. And even then, when you call a new vendor, they're kind of like, "Well, why did you lose your previous account?" Well, you have to tell them, because they're going to Google your name anyway. Right. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, we're not touching you guys." And so we went through 2 or 3 different potentials. And finally, we found a fantastic company, which is with us to this very day. It's been a long time now. These guys are the best, perhaps, in the conservative space. But we lost that specifically because of that. That was just the first leg in that deplatforming, because then you fast forward a few months later, and it wasn't the next day, but it was very soon after that, where we then began to get messages from the company that we use to deploy all of our emails. And these are not just emails to our Second Amendment supporters, but also to folks. We are now doing emails to people about the lockdowns and about the quarantine craziness. Again, using the tools that we developed over all these years doing gun politics. And this company reached out to us and basically said that you guys are on thin ice. If you use phrases that sound militaristic, like we're going to go out there, we're going to fight to hold the line. If you say that, that sounds like you're being that you're inciting violence.
Yeah.
And we're going to yank you. And I think we lived in that world with them for a month or two, like trying to find a way to, to say what we wanted to say without going all the way. Similar to Facebook, what's that movable line you can never quite identify. But eventually, same thing. They gave us zero notice. Boom, we lose our ability to message to millions of gun owners across the various states that we work in. And I think that's what it was a good thing that we had that our experience is in the political space, because I think for a lot of people, a lot of great activists out there, when these hits began to come and they would lose their Facebook page, or they would lose their local nonprofit status, they would lose their donation platform for their small little work, they didn't know what to do. And it's no insult to them. They simply didn't have, the experience in this space. And thank God we had friends, and we had contacts, and we had high-ranking friends and high-ranking contacts to reach out to and get us replatformed. But that was all happening as we were doing all this stuff at the exact same time.
I remember thinking to myself, oh, thank God that Aaron's the rallies and stuff that he's running are not on the same day that mine are, because there I was out in front of the Capitol in Harrisburg, and CNN is doing interviews with me, sticking there, and of course they got their reporters were all masked up at this point, and they're sticking their microphones in my face as one of the two organizing entities on this massive rally. There was probably 15, 20, 25,000 people there all around the Pennsylvania Capitol building up there on the hill. And CNN sticking their camera in my face, trying to guilt me into thinking that I'm responsible for all these grandmas and grandpas dying all across the country by creating this mass spreader event. And that's the first time I had met like Doug Mastriano, the leader, like kind of like the figurehead of the opposition against this stuff. And there I am doing all these, like a whole line of interviews. Every single one of them is trying to target us. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, thank goodness that Aaron is in Command Central getting all this stuff lined back up. It was a big sense of relief. And that's, especially in Pennsylvania, that was one of the things that we were able to do by taking these mobilization tools that we use on a day-to-day basis. We were able to create standalone versions of that then were targeted at people's state representatives and state senators.
And the governor.
You have governors.
Yeah, and governors. But a lot of the problem was the governors had already taken unilateral action. They were not conferring with we the people, whose representatives in government is the state legislatures. They were just taking action by executive fiat. And so we turned our tools on the state legislators, and now all of a sudden these state representatives and senators were getting massive amounts of emails from their people saying, you guys better stand up and do the freaking job that you're supposed to do. And that was a huge tool that we were able to then, in Pennsylvania, for example, we were able to then go further in subsequent later on that year and strip away the power of the governor to continue those executive orders without legislative approval. And it was very carefully navigated in order to make sure we weren't deplatformed across the board. So,
and there was and I want to throw something in here. Morons try to accuse us of somehow financially capitalizing on the COVID fight. Aaron, you were talking about some of the personal sacrifices that happened because of that, but also, especially in the beginning, we had when we had determined to use our infrastructure to reopen our states and stop the lockdowns, we had a lot of our own gun rights members started calling us outright, lifetime members. These people had given $500,000 more.
Yep.
They were convinced by the media that we were all going to die.
Yeah.
And they were outraged at us for not staying home. And they were cussing us out, and they're pulling their memberships, physically pulling their financial support from the gun rights organizations that we work with because of our COVID response. And we said, no, don't think so. I think you've got this one wrong. I think we got this one right. And we're not going to sit here and do nothing while these people completely fuck our lives over.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what we did. So far be it from us having somehow made money off of fighting the lockdowns. It only cost us. The only thing we gained out of all of it was freedom. That's it. And that was the only thing we tried to gain. That was the only thing we were fighting for. So it came at a financial cost to our day jobs, so to speak, to the nonprofits and the gun rights organizations that we work with, but it sparked a full-blown opposition campaign against the powers that be and a radical tyrannical government who was locking us all down. So that was we make no apologies for that. We made none at the time. But I hope that sets the record straight on what the response was, or what the.
Well, we could have just sat home on our asses like everybody else did. We didn't have to do any of this. If we wanted to sit back on our butts, let our country burn to the ground, and say, we'll come back into gun politics, a year from now when things cool down, if they cool down. That's what most people did on the conservative space. That's what a lot of folks did. So our options were to do that, which everybody else did the way it's at that time. And it wasn't everybody else, but that's how it seemed. We could have done that. We haven't even got to the death threats yet. So you talk about the cost. It wasn't just what you described, Ben. There was a lot more because I'm sure we'll get to them in a few minutes. But when the world found out who was doing this, and you've got everything from Al Jazeera to the Des Moines Register and everywhere in between doing these hit pieces on us. Well, our personal addresses got out pretty quick also. And people were losing their freaking mind about the fact that a bunch of farm kids from Iowa originally were the ones who were coordinating perhaps the largest organized response to this, perhaps at that time in the country. And some of those people were absolutely insane and threatened real death and violence. Whatever you guys want to discuss that, we can do that too. But I laugh at people who sanctimoniously, arrogantly, scoffingly assume there was some sort of a profit motive behind this because, again, the easy thing to do, you sit back, say nothing, keep our heads down, like every lame Republican lawmaker did in red and blue states, with maybe 2% of those or exceptions to that rule. Everybody else did that approach.
Right.
We could have done that too, and we chose not to. And for that, there was a price paid. But I don't think for a second. I know for a fact that was not unknown to us at the time. We knew full dang and good well, we do this is going to blow up, and there's going to be folks that go crazy on us, and who knows what could happen with this. But like you said,
we had been fighting against Republicans and Democrats, rhinos, pushing gun control and stopping pro-gun bills, and Democrats for 10 years at that point, longer. You don't think we knew that right now being at that moment, for the first time, maybe in the history of our entire country, both parties, all the media, all the pundits, all the nonprofits, all the organizations, everybody was on the exact same page. Lockdown, quarantine, shut up, mask up. That was every single person other than the everyday man. All of them on both sides of the aisle were saying for the first time, and maybe the last time, the exact same thing. And we would have been the biggest fools in the world if we had thought this is a great time to capitalize. We're going to go against everybody everywhere. We're going to get rich. I mean, the retardation, people who say that really are absolute retards. I know that one gun tuber was talking about that the other day. Total maroon if you think that was somehow the plan, because that would not have gone well. It didn't go well, again, other than the freedom that eventually we were able to regain in our country.
I think a lot of folks that accuse us of that, I'm sorry, very quickly, Chris, a lot of folks that accuse us of that, in my mind, are sitting there racked with guilt that they didn't do shit when the country was on the brink. that they sat back in fear and in dread terror and complied with everything. And so they had to get real with the fact, if they were a right leaning, if you're a lefty, then you're just, whatever. But for those on the right side, or who think they're on the right side, most of that attack against us was because, looking back, they're racked with shame. Right. And they get to tell their grandkids that when the world was teetering, when Western civilization was teetering on the brink of being just locked down, when our rights were being suspended, all this crap happened, Grandpa sat like a bitch in the living room, terrified, watching the TV, trying to figure out where he was going to go find some toilet paper. And that's what motivates, in my opinion, a lot of the Republican-based attack against us. It's shame for their inaction, and they deserve that shame for their inaction.
Well, some people who actually have character acknowledge that, and they said, "Hey, look, I got it wrong. Right. In April, I believed what I was being told. I thought 14 days to slow the spread. I was pretty confident that these guys got it right. And I was wrong." I've heard that from hundreds and hundreds of people personally. But Aaron, I think you nailed it. The ones who are still over there accusing us of this stuff now, they're the ones who cannot deal with the fact that they just drank the Kool-Aid, swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. Probably, I mean, it's like all these people with masks on in all these stores. Every time I would walk into like a Fleet Farm, especially later on, people see me without a mask on because I never wore a mask any damn place. And they would, and like some of them would look, and I kind of look over my shoulder, and they're peeling their masks off and they're sticking them in their pockets. Yeah. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew it was a lie, but they could not stand up against it. They could not bring themselves to be the only one. They didn't want the eyeballs to be looking at them. And this is, and the left knew this. They knew this at the beginning of COVID. I'm going on a little tangent here. They knew this at the beginning of COVID. This has been psychology 101 that these people figured out 100 years ago. It's like, right, if you put 10 people in a room, 9 of them are bought and paid for operatives. The 10th guy, he's just there because he was a part of this experiment. Well, so you got a picture of a dog, right? And it's a freaking dog. But you put the first guy up there, he goes, "That's a horse." And the second guy goes, "That's a horse." And the third guy goes, "That's a horse." By the time you get to the 10th guy, he's looking at this picture. He knows it's not a fucking horse, but everybody else said it was a horse. And he cannot bring himself to say, "That's not a horse, that's a dog." And they say, and they have done these experiments and they go, "Nope, that's a horse," because it takes courage of your convictions in that moment to say, "You are all wrong. That is a damn dog, as plain as I've ever seen one." And that's what happened with COVID. People knew it was a lie, but they could not bring themselves to stand against it. I'm proud to say I wore a mask on a couple of airplanes because I had to get to the other side of the country. And I wore a mask in a hospital one time. And I went to every gas station, every grocery store, every post office, every place, every time, without a mask, because I was not, this is not about patting myself on the back. I was not willing to just embrace the lie. And so those, again, just going back at the end of this tangent here, those who still attack us today for that, you're either a radical lefty who's still masking up, or you're somebody who cannot deal with the shame of what you did during COVID. And
you're probably on your 5th booster. So get the out of here.
It's true.
What I missed the most about it, I mean, honestly, it was a very trying time for the whole country, but what I missed the most about it, number one, was the traffic, but number two, I miss going up the aisles in Walmart or the grocery stores in the opposite direction of those stupid fucking arrows on the ground. Oh my gosh, it was the height of political pleasure for me to walk into any grocery store and go the opposite direction, because I was like shocking people out of their stupidity. I mean, I just walk up to people and be like, "Hey, how you doing?" And acting like normal, like a normal person should. Right. And they'd be like, "Pretty good. Where's your mask?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't wear those stupid things. Anthony Fauci said that they're worthless." I miss that a lot. One of the things I want to circle back real quick and talk about was the fact that if we had let them use this manufactured crisis to strip away all of these freedoms for us, it would have blown the door open for the radical left who's been talking, for the gun control crowd that has been talking for a decade now about how the gun crisis is a public health crisis. And they could have used that as an excuse to totally obliterate the Second Amendment at will at some point down the road. And we knew that that's the way these people are. This is what they will do if given the opportunity. And so, of course, we were all in. Here's the chips. Let's go. And as a result, I think we lost people at the outset. But, man, did we gain some massive credibility by being 100% right when it was all over with. So
it's true.
Yeah.
Again,
we gained a lot of people, I think, for the first time in their lives who realized why we actually have a Second Amendment in the first place. I mean,
damn right.
I'll be honest, I've been involved in the fight for gun rights professionally for 12 years or something before then. But even then, for all that time, most people talked about gun rights as an academic conversation.
Yeah.
It was not part of their normal course of thought process. Realize that there's an actual reason why we have this, and it's a combination of things. Like I remember watching the absolute massive riots in front of the Iowa state capitol. Again, we're talking about Iowa here. We're not talking about like Columbus, mega population cities, or Albany, New York, or Atlanta, Georgia. This is just regular old Des Moines, and seeing like hundreds and hundreds of people in May of that year storming the Capitol. There's tear gas being lobbed everywhere. There's all kinds of chaos and violence. A lot of people called the office the next day saying, damn, I need to get a gun. They begin to realize for the first time, like, this world is not as safe as they thought it was. But then the flip side of that coin was people realize our own government is also the reason why we have to have a gun. Watching these lockdowns, watching every freaking Karen in the country, no offense to the good Karens out there, calling into the local health commissar, trying to wreck your damn Thanksgiving dinner. Like, people realize for the first time, if these governments, if they get the power, they will never give it back, and they will boot stomp us into submission if they get the chance. And all you had to do to see what would have happened is turn on the freaking news. Well, not the news, but hop online and see what happened in Australia.
Yeah.
See what happened in China. See what happened basically anywhere in Europe. Hell, you could see what happened in Minneapolis when those soldiers were going down the street shooting their damn paintball guns at people who dared to walk out on their porch. I mean, that's how close we were. And I think for a lot of people, to your point, we lost people who did not realize they were on the wrong side of history. But a lot of people opened up their eyes and realized, whether it's in the law and order side of the equation or the government side of the equation, there is a reason why we have a Second Amendment. There's a reason why we have to defend it. Mark McCloskey was part of that fight. He was an object lesson for a lot of people in that. A lot of soccer moms woke up. A lot of leftists became pro-gun all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, that's one of the big benefits, if there is any, in the COVID situation is man, they basically like changed the two-way conversation for forever, because nobody who was alive at that time, older than the age of about 5, is ever going to forget what it felt like to be unable to leave their homes if they complied, to have dad lose his job or mom lose her job. And have to hope to God there was going to be chicken and eggs and milk at the grocery store, and then all of that in an armed country. If we were an unarmed country, oh my goodness, it'd have been so much worse. So in some ways, that's a benefit that came from
the only reason they weren't going door to door and dragging us out of our homes like they did in Australia. The only reason why they weren't welding the apartment complex's doors shut with freaking plates of steel is because they knew that a bombardment of lead bullets would have flown out of those doors if they ever tried that in Red America. That's it. That's the only reason why America didn't look exactly like that, because we would have shot them with guns dead. So all of a sudden, for the first time in our generation, in our lifetime, there was visual representation of how powerful and necessary the Second Amendment and private gun ownership was. Beautiful thing. An unintended consequence that they didn't plan on.
Yeah. As a side note, Aaron, you brought up the kids, and I'll just say for the record that my boys never put a mask on one time ever. That was not to go any place for any reason whatsoever. And I feel kind of like we're doing a little bit of this, but I think it's important because a lot of people have spoken up about COVID after the fact and never acknowledged, like we've talked about, what they did during COVID, you know? And so it's like, look, if you're the guy who masked up, if you're the guy who put a mask on your wife, if you're the people who stayed home from church and then masked up to go to church, if you're the one who put the mask on your kids and sent them off in school to sit in little plastic pods, you know, and you complied with this whole thing, and now they're going to go into sports, and now they're all wearing masks in order to play hockey, and if you did all of this, and you're speaking up against all of it now, you should either apologize and say, I got this part wrong, and I'm opposed to it now for all these reasons, or you should be quiet because you were the one who drank the Kool-Aid. You probably were going after your neighbors or your friends or your family. If you went along with the entire narrative, you need to make good on that. And so just for whatever it's worth for us, none of our kids wore masks. None of us did that crap because I remember so vividly at the time that I would have rather taken a bullet, frankly. I mean, it's the lie. At that time, it was the ultimate lie. It was the fundamental lie. It was the spiritual lie. And it was a picture of the tyranny. And I was not going to wear the tyranny on my very face. The face that God gave me, I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to do it. I would have done anything else. I'd have gone to jail over it. I'd have gotten fines for it. I'd have taken a bullet for it. I was not going to do it under any circumstances.
Yeah. Just by them wanting you to put the mask on was them demanding that you repeat the lie. And you're right. I was never going to do that. I have a funny story about this real quick. My family was visiting a church one Sunday. We walked in. We saw everything was, spaced apart according to, at the time, we were in Pennsylvania, according to Dick Levine's mandates. And we walked in, we're like, oh, this is supposed to be a good church. We'll just sit down in these spaced out rows, but whatever. And so we sat down and I heard a commotion over to my down our row. I think at the time I probably had 7 kids. Got 9 now, but I had 7 at the time. And I looked down my row and I heard this commotion. I look over and there's one of the elders of the church coming up our row of chairs, and he's passing out masks to my kids. And my one daughter, she's probably my sassiest daughter. She took it, she looked over at me, and she threw the mask on the floor, just like right to that elder. And I ended up going 4 rounds with the elder in the back of the church. And he was a retired medical doctor and telling me that he thought it was God's plan to just go ahead and submit to Dick Levine's big, disgusting mandates and orders for the church. And but that, like Ben said, my kids never wore a mask. And it was a great opportunity for me to instruct them to be equipped for the rest of their lives against this kind of bull crap, both in and out of the church. So anyway, end of that fun little story.
Yeah. Aaron, you want to talk about some of these hit pieces? These were some major ones. Again, it garnered a lot of death threats. You know, my quick story is that I was co-hosted a rally in front of the state capitol in Madison, Wisconsin. There was at least 20,000 people there. It was humongous because, again, the Wisconsinites Against Excessive Quarantine group had 120,000 people in it at the time, and tens of thousands of people showed up. And I'm there at this rally, and this is right after we're being hit by Washington Post. We're being attacked by all of these news entities. And so now the Minneapolis Star Tribune's doing articles. All the Minnesota media is doing articles about me in particular, because I lived in Northfield, Minnesota at that time. And I see my address in the comments section of the biggest news agency in the entire state of Minnesota. And they said, this is Ben Dorr's address. Let's go to his house and fuck him up. And there was like 150, 160 thumbs up on it. And it was my address. They had it. And my wife is at home. She is all 9 months pregnant, not 8 months, not 8.5 months. Honestly, I shouldn't have been in Madison anyway. She was all the 9 months pregnant. And I see this news article. So I called the Northfield Police Department and I said, could you please do some rounds? Well, I was like, Google me, I guess. And then if you would do some rounds around my house. And they did. It said, if there's anybody in the front yard holding signs, they're not welcome. And if there's anybody smashing my windows in, they're also not welcome. So I ended up hightailing it back from there with our baby on the way. My wife calls, said, this baby's coming right now. So 4 hours back home because people on the internet were saying they're going to come to the house and kill us all. So that was those are fun times, I guess. But then all of these other news stories came out. We can walk through them if you want, Aaron.
Well, here's some of the death threats. You mentioned threats, Ben. This is one of yours, I think.
This is
one of yours. I don't think Thomas liked you very much. I think what we found out is looking back on these pages and trying to grab some of these screenshots. A lot of these pages have no longer exist. A lot of these idiots
profiles
no longer. The profiles are gone, so their comments are gone too. But that was one of the ones that I got. And this is kind of funny. So when you send a message into Iowa gun owners via the website, it generates an email to my email address. So it says from Iowa gun owners. It's actually not, but it comes via the website to my email. Same thing. They're going to do all this kind of stuff to you and, whatever. I'm going to slice your blanking throat. And that you deserve it. Stuff like that. So this happened dozens and dozens of times. This is not, we found one or two screenshots here. Whatever he said in the last line was so bad that I had to black the whole thing out. So now I can't remember what that was, but that was obviously something a little more excessive. But yeah, it happened.
I look at that one right there, and where they say this is the land of the free, not the land of Christian gun nut extremism. I'm sorry, but Christians built this country, buddy. And we're taking it back now. So
yeah. And a lot of things, a lot of this came from the Facebook pages, also because of all the media hits that we were getting. So this Washington Post one. This was the first one. We already kind of covered this a little bit ago. It was then picked up by Al Jazeera. Not let's just say not everybody who reads Al Jazeera is a nice person, and so that definitely spawned some stuff. This is a good one here. Really enjoyed some of the articles here. They always get the age thing backwards. It's kind of fun how it's Ben, Chris, and Aaron. It's just hilarious to me how these guys.
I like that. PAEQ. So this is Pennsylvanians Against Excessive Quarantine. Appears to be organized by members of the Dorr family, which has lobbied against gun control and for other conservative causes for years. I'm happy that they actually got that. They didn't get much right, but they nailed some of that stuff, and I loved it.
Yeah, NBC had a big follow-on post. This was, I think, like the day or two after WAPO hit. Family-run network of pro-gun groups is behind 5 of the largest Facebook groups dedicated to protesting shelter-in-place restrictions. And this was a huge. There you go, Ben. That's the Minnesota State Governor's Mansion.
Oh, correct? That's right. There's Tim Walz. There's Tim Walz's house. I remember that NBC article was nasty. That was the nasty one.
The nastiest.
I remember this vicious, nasty biche who was messaging me on Twitter, and she was just a peach, demanding comments from me. Just, oh my good gosh, it was unbelievable. It was kind of a first for me. But that NBC article was wild.
Yeah, I'm trying to find some of the rest of them. There wasn't a lot. We had a brief one here. DMR did the Des Moines paper thought they had a handle on this because the Dorr family is from Iowa. So they ran article after article about the crazy Dorr brothers who were behind the reopen protests popping up all across the country.
I did love how Moms Demand Action jumped on top of this because we've been fighting them in state legislatures all across the country for years. So they instantly went up with a Facebook article. I also like this one. Where to go? The Daily Mail. Yeah, check this out right here. Revealed the 3 pro-gun activist brothers behind blah 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 blah. These guys did an actually pretty good comprehensive job. They got
who's that young kid there?
Yeah, who is that baby? Oh golly, there's another young baby on the left, Chris Dorr. Aaron on the right. That's when we were in the White House meeting with policy staff against red flags. But then they got screenshots of all the Facebook groups. Wisconsinites against excessive quarantine, Operation Gridlock, Pennsylvania, Ohioans against excessive quarantine, New Yorkers. They did a good job. They did a really good job and covered quite a bit of it. But yeah, these are all leftist news media, and the intent, the consequence that they were after there was to just turn everybody onto us to try to get Facebook to shut us down.
And the rage just got hotter and hotter and hotter because Facebook wouldn't shut us down, because Facebook said these guys aren't doing anything wrong. And it made people even more pissed off because, everybody was getting nuked on Facebook. So why weren't the Dorr brothers being nuked on Facebook? And a lot of people asked a lot of questions. You scroll back down to that White House photograph there, Chris. A lot of people were making the accusations that we had protection way up in the White House. I'm not sure we have time to discuss all those interactions, but they got more and more angry because they couldn't get us shut down, and that was a pleasurable.
We had some communication with people that made it very clear that, and if you guys remember at the time, President Trump was not going right along with the main lock. He wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't going out there saying, I'm doing this and that. And we were told very clearly that the president was looking for obvious signs that the people were against this stuff. So we're like, you know what? It factored into our equation. Let's go all in and show them that there's a whole bunch of people that are totally opposed to this crap. The people, especially the people that voted him in 2016, were definitely against this. And we were happy to help. We were very happy to help.
Yeah. Kind of the opposite of stand back and stand by. It was like,
right.
We're going to show exactly how much rage there was against these policies. Ben, you mentioned what you would do to avoid taking the mask or wearing the mask. A lot of people thought that way, that I would do a lot of things to avoid losing my job. I do a lot of things to avoid having to take a jab in my damn arm because my boss is going to fire me if I don't. And so there was a ton of anger out there. They just need to have a vehicle to express that. And so you mentioned, Chris, a while back, some of the minutia stuff, like when we give people a platform to send a pre-written email to their state rep from their district saying, you fix this or I'll find somebody who will. Like, now we're getting way out of the headlines and right down into where these politicians live and breathe.
Yes.
And I hit on Kim Reynolds earlier. Kim Reynolds was terrible on this for a bit. And I don't know if it was 6 months. I don't know if it was 9 months, whatever it was. She finally realized, because all these state reps in Des Moines were saying, you need to fix this or we're going to find a governor who freaking will. And all of a sudden she realized she couldn't please the left. And you're not going to please the right if you keep locking down the damn state. And all of a sudden a switch was flipped and Kim ran to the right. And frankly, she's never looked back. It's been 5 years now and she's been one of America's most, freedom-oriented governors.
Well, that was the case with all of these people, though. And we've known this for 15 years. The people are the ones that pass the policy, not the politicians. The people demand, and politicians either acquiesce or they get removed, and then they put the next guy in there. So all these rallies, I'll just talk about Minnesota, all these rallies we held, there was like one or 2 state representatives out of 134 reps and 67 senators, 2 people showed up at the governor's mansion to oppose the lockdowns, right? So the party, the GOP as a whole, Kim Reynolds, take your pick, whoever your Republican is, sat there and waited until the grassroots, which we were mobilizing, were pushing at a fever pitch to end the tyranny, end the lockdowns, end the mandates. And only then, not out of any belief, these people didn't suddenly realize. No, they said, oh, the science has spoken, blah, 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 blah. And then they finally listened. But it's always been power belongs in the hands of the people. It resides in the hands of the people. And if we can gather enough of it together, enough people together to push an agenda, we can win. And that's exactly what we did with COVID. And then I'll throw this in here real quick. Once this news broke all over the place, so all these, we just went through NBC and death threats and all these WAPO and Moms Demand Action, Al Jazeera. Once all of these people hit us, well, then what happened literally overnight is every single state in the country birthed a group with the same name. So once the initial lockdowns ended, we started changing the names to Reopen Minnesota, Reopen Ohio, Reopen. So that's what then the media started reporting on that. So literally overnight, Reopen Arizona, Reopen Nevada, Reopen California. Every single state now had a Reopen group, and people that we had no contact with whatsoever, millions of people, were now going to their state capitals, going to their governor's mansions, opposing these lockdowns. And, all we had to do, as always, this is like Founding Fathers 101. You got to light a brush fire and it spread. So we lit a brush fire, and all of a sudden millions of people went, hey, we can do this too. We can do this too. And that's precisely how this went down. It was amazing.
I think we should play them the video, right? I mean, because once everybody knew what was going on, then the Antifa crowd started coming at us with a bunch of their stuff. Do we have that video? We got to play that video.
I think we do have. So you don't mean Glenn Beck? You mean angry Antifa guys?
Yeah. Yes.
Just wanted to get my video straight.
I don't know how much of this we're going to be able to let play by itself.
We'll probably beep a little bit of it out.
A little colorful.
If you hear, if our editor has to do like beep, 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 beep after the fact, just know it was good. It was it was better than what it's going to sound with all this.
Hi, you Nazi f***its. I was just wondering the best bullets to shoot a first grader with. Guess what? Trump still f***ing lost, you goddamn f***ing morons. Suck my mother Antifa dick. We have guns too. I'm not scared of you. I'll fuck use mine too, you f***ing Nazi pieces of shit. Ha 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 ha. Trump still f***ing lost. He's gonna die in prison. Suck my Antifa. Georgia Antifa owns you.
Oh my word!
Absolute derangement.
Kills me.
Absolute, like these people are these. It's like it's hilarious, and I love so much what our video editor did with is that X-Files? Is that X-Files music? I don't even know what that was.
No, it wasn't X-Files.
With that, well, you'll remember which one it was.
One of those true crime shows. One of those true crime shows.
Cop show, whatever it was. But these were the people who were messaging us nonstop, hundreds and hundreds of messages and phone calls like this. We're going to kill you. We're coming to your house to kill you. We're going to kill your family. We're going to kill your wife and kids. You deserve to die. It was never ending. And so looking back, it's been a few years, but these were very much, it's like, what's that guy going to do if he decides to take a cruise over to one of our homes?
Yeah.
And that stuff came pretty religiously at that time. And that was just one of the more colorful ones.
It's always these radicalized lefties who and who actually take action on their worldview. Just think of the Steve Scalise shooter, traveled from Iowa out to the DC baseball games. Think of that Nashville church shooter, transvestite. They psych them. They actually believe the rhetoric that the left is using, that we're all Nazis or we're all this or we're all that, and they go out and take action. So yeah, these were very serious things that in retrospect, it's pretty funny now, but it wouldn't be so funny if they were showing up in your yard at 2:00 in the morning when you're sound asleep with your family.
Yeah, that was the Mark McCloskey story, not for the same reason, obviously. But yeah, I mean, cops wouldn't come in. I'm surprised the cops did drive-bys for you, Ben, to be honest, because, they wouldn't do in many of the blue states and blue cities, they wouldn't get involved at all during those mostly peaceful protests. Later on that year, we mentioned McCloskey before. He's a friend of mine. Guy calls police. I need help. I got a mob of 400 people coming to my house. They're like, yeah, we're not coming. She's not showing up. Screw you. And
I was fortunate. There was a police sergeant in the PD there who I'd worked with multiple times before. I'd have people show up at my office and barge in the door and start screaming at me right in my office room that I had to physically remove. I've had physical altercations with totally psychopathic leftists. And I've had to call the police more than once or twice on people who just barged right into the office. So at least
you have one of those Somali guys? Didn't you have one of those Somali Muslims like outside your office door and you're watching on your security camera and he's like praying to Mecca in front of your damn door?
Bowing right in front of my door. If I can find that video clip, I'm going to have our editor put that in here. I don't know if I still have it, but yeah, full blown bowing, praying right outside my office door facing east. And this stuff was happening. It was like every day, dude. It was never ending. It was never ending at that time. And you know what? Just to shift gears a little bit and to go back to what we were talking about before, again, the left and the right were on the exact same page on this stuff. And what did we notice right out of the gate? We didn't get any phone calls from Fox News. We didn't get any phone calls from any of the so-called conservative media. Nobody would touch us and this issue because that's how early on in the fight we were. I'm convinced that if this had all started a couple months later, perhaps we would have been on some of the bigger shows as people like Tucker started to figure it out pretty quick. But we, frankly, the work we did predated anybody speaking against the lockdowns who was not instantly removed from all of the social media platforms. And so the right-wing media decided not to call. I don't know if there's something you wanted to throw in there, Aaron, but there was one guy who did reach out for an interview at that time, and that was Glenn Beck. Now, people can say, and we might even say some things now, but I have always personally been very grateful to Glenn Beck, to his producers, I won't name them here, who reached out and were willing to give us a chance to talk about what we were doing and why, when the rest of the right-wing media went completely silent. But we have a little clip here of when I was on with Glenn. I knew when they reached out, I was hoping to sit in studio with them and have a conversation, but of course it was COVID. So he was, I think he was in like a home office quarantine thing. And I was on the phone for this interview, but do we want to play just this clip?
Hit it. I'll do it. I'll hit it right here. Here we
go for it.
Well, I'd never heard of Ben Dorr before. He's a political activist. Okay. He's the director of the Minnesota gun rights. I decided to call him up and talk to him, and here he is. Ben, are you George Soros?
Significantly less well-funded.
Significantly. Yeah.
Significantly. Well, that's been the question we've been getting, and thanks for having me on, Glenn. I appreciate it. That's been the question we've been getting from, well, frankly, left-wing media for the last 48 hours is who's funding this big cabal? Who's the, what puppet masters are behind this? Is President Trump paying you to put on these protests? Who's doing this? It's simply grassroots Americans who are standing up. They want their jobs back. They want their lives back. They want their freedom back. And it's not a hard stretch to imagine that hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans are standing up to say that enough is enough.
There we go. Because that was the accusation was these are not real people in these groups. That was the main thing the left was talking about was these are not human beings. And anybody who's even remotely reasonable in our country would certainly be fine with staying home and masking up and locking down and 14 days to slow the spread. That was the propaganda vacuum that we were all living in at that time. And that's why I wanted to get the message across. Every single person in one of these Facebook groups that we Dorr brothers are running right now is a real person. They are Americans. They are opposed to the lockdowns. They're not buying the narrative. And even if they are concerned, they're not willing to let you, the government, completely destroy their lives and take away their freedom to make choices about their own bodies. Isn't that what the left always says? My body, my choice. My body, my choice.
Yeah,
well, all of that was taken away during COVID. All that was taken away. Now they're back at it. My body, my choice. No kings, right? All this stuff. But during COVID, it was you don't have a choice. It's not your body. You're going to get that shot. You're going to stay at home. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And that is always the unbelievable hypocrisy of the radical left. And they never stop. And that's why we're never going to stop fighting them. And that's why we didn't stop at that time. So again, I want to thank Glenn Beck for having us on. I think I was able to, if you want to find that, we'll probably put that link to the whole interview in the show notes on this or in the description of this video, so you can watch the full interview that I did with Glenn at that time. Let's see where do we go from there? I know we continue to hold Operation Gridlock rallies. We did them in Minnesota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New York, and Iowa. And by then again, the Republicans were finally starting to say, "Hey, now we don't like any of this stuff." Once the grassroots were pushing them very hard on this, but that was the role that we played at that time. And then NPR decides that they're going to roll out an 8-part what do you want to call it? Podcast series on the Dorr brothers. It's called No Compromise. NPR, you're welcome for more clicks. But they rolled out a podcast and were viciously attacking us on that. They won a Pulitzer Prize for their podcast, the only Pulitzer Prize that NPR has ever won for any reason whatsoever. And now
or will ever win.
Been defunded. They'll probably never win another Pulitzer ever again. I don't know about you guys, but I was thrilled when I saw it's like NPR is firing people and they're laying off this and that, and they're losing their public funding. They shouldn't have had public funding to begin with. Okay, they've always been a propaganda arm of the establishment. And they should either pay their own way to voice propaganda on the American people, or they shouldn't exist. So hopefully they're dead, and they stay dead.
I did forget about NPR for a minute, which is kind of hard to imagine, but it's definitely worth the context. I mean, as this is going on and we're being deplatformed, we're losing our credit card vendors, we're losing our email vendors. We have all these people coming, death threats and crap. Was it Wednesday morning? Every Tuesday, whenever it was, every Tuesday morning, you get to wake up and play a 45-minute, hit story against the Dorr brothers. They're interviewing our neighbors. They're interviewing our board members. They're going to people's homes, trying to stir up crap. They went to a great Missouri Firearms Coalition member's home in Missouri, to ask him about, these fraudulent Dorr brothers. And so again, it's you know, not pat our backs too hard, but we were put in this position for a reason, because most people, most good activist types who had not been experienced to the political pressure that our jobs normally put us in, that would be a very tough thing to continue to thrive in, and we did. And that was a heck of a deal. But yeah, if you get a chance, check out No Compromise on NPR.
Yeah. I mean, we've always been how do I say it? We've always been worldview oriented, mission oriented. It's never about the politics necessarily. It's not about money. It's not about what do the kids call it? Clout, internet clout. It's not about internet clout. We fought against COVID because it seemed very clear to me that it's what God wanted us to do. It was because what was happening was wrong. And if something's wrong, you should say something about it. If something is wrong, you should fight against it if you have the power to do so. And we did, at least to some degree. It was small. But again, brush fires start as a match. Matches are pretty damn small, but they can go a long, long ways. And so we fought for those reasons, because freedom is something worth maintaining. Our country is worth fighting for. And the right to make your decisions, the right to be free from tyranny. These things are not just constitutional rights. These are biblical rights. These are the rights given to free men and women. And those were what were being viciously attacked during COVID. And again, it was so clear that's what was going to happen before it ever even did. And that's why we fought against this stuff. We took this risk. To our livelihoods, to our families, to ourselves, personally, politically, physically, financially, because it was clear to us, again, that what was happening was wrong. And at least where I come from as a Christian, as a Reformed Christian, standing up against the total destruction of our families, our homes, our communities, our towns, our cities, our history. That's what was at stake during COVID. And we were willing to risk it all in order to oppose what was being foisted on the American people. We did risk it all. God blessed our efforts. I think that we were able to jumpstart the opposition to the COVID tyranny way sooner than anybody anticipated. I don't think the left and the media anticipated anybody at that stage in the game doing full-blown rebellion against government orders. But that's exactly what we were there to do. Proud to have done it. Perhaps one of the things I'm most proud to have participated in politics. And again, if you want to know what drives the Dorr brothers, it is our Christian worldview. Yeah. And we will oppose tyrants. We will, on both sides. There are Republican tyrants. There are rhinos. There are fake Republicans who don't give a shit about you, your freedom, what you believe in. They don't care about God, even though they stand up there and pretend that they do when they're running for office. We will oppose them all. It's what we did during COVID. And this is what we're going to keep doing going forward. So, guys, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but
I just want to say one thing. I don't think that we've seen the last of big attacks against our freedoms like this. Maybe it won't be COVID. It's going to be something else maybe next time. But so we're not done with this for the long term. But what I would say to every globalist who ever watches this, or every little county health commissar who watches this, I'd say this. My take on this right now is you had your shot and you lost. Because I'll be very candid. The people who complied with this crap are old, and their days are rapidly accelerating. And I've got children who are now adults. I've got young people I talk to every day in my home and at my church. And I can tell you this, if you don't like the tone and the flavor and the fervor of us, you do not want to meet a 20-year-old who grew up in COVID. You don't want to talk to these young people today, because they are far more aggressive than we are. They are far less compliant than we ever have been. This next generation, I think, is going to be used by God to push back in a way that, frankly, the current generation simply are incapable of for various reasons. But as this older generation fades from the scene, you are not going to get the same percentage of compliant sheep the next time you try to close down our entire country. But you tried, you got some success, no question about that, but you did not go far enough. We rose up as a people. We all now know what this was. And the younger generation, they will never comply with this the way that their grandparents' generation did. And to me, that's one of the most exciting things about looking back on COVID now 5 years in the rearview mirror.
Yes. So guys, I hope that answers some of your questions. If you have more, drop them in the comments section. We'd be happy to jump in there and answer them ourselves if we're able to do so. Please do us a favor if you want to see more of this content. Like, share, subscribe to the channel that you are watching this on. We have more past stories and future things that we're working on that we want to tell you guys about, bring you along with, and we'd be happy to have your viewership as we move forward. So like, share, subscribe. Send this to anybody you know who has been asking questions about the doors and COVID. And rest assured that if another random pandemic pops up, we're going to try to do just the same. So God bless you. We'll talk again soon.